Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking something absolutely crucial, the cognitive architecture of individual differences in learning. We're going to move way beyond the basics today to explore exactly why our brains acquire knowledge so uniquely and how those underlying structures literally dictate cognitive success or cognitive friction in standard environments.
Take a second and just reflect on your own learning experiences, whether that's in an advanced academic setting or maybe a professional development workshop. Why is it that some people absolutely thrive in a standard setup, while others really struggle? We all know that traditional one-size-fits-all educational approach is fundamentally flawed. I mean, when an instructor delivers information in just one singular format, cognitive friction is inevitable for some, right? Meanwhile, others just effortlessly excel. It's a variance we've all witnessed firsthand, but let's actually look at the mechanics of why that persists.
Section 1. Defining individual differences.
So, what do we mean when we talk about this? Well, in a learning context, individual differences represent the precise cognitive variances in how people process, encode, and ultimately synthesize information. This isn't just a feel-good way of acknowledging that everyone is different. No, it's recognizing that the baseline of human cognition is this incredibly complex web of distinct traits, neural pathways, and processing habits. We're dealing with highly individualized cognitive architecture here, and because of that, forcing uniformity in education isn't just ineffective, it's scientifically incongruent with how human memory and comprehension actually operate.
Section 2. The causes of difference.
Okay, let's dive into this. Where do these variations actually come from? The first pillar of this architecture is hereditary. We're talking about the unchangeable, genetic factors that make up a learner's biological baseline. It's actually pretty fascinating when you consider that genetic factors can account for over 50% of the variance in traits like working memory capacity and processing speed. So this innate intellectual capacity and your fundamental neurological wiring, they provide the raw cognitive material long before a classroom or a curriculum is ever even introduced. It's literally the biological hardware we boot up with. But, as we know, that hardware requires an operating environment, which brings us to environmental causes. This is that classic nature versus nurture contrast. Your immediate physical surroundings and external stimuli are dynamically interacting with your genetic baseline every single day. Things like resource availability, early exposure to complex problem solving, and even the ambient stress levels of a learning environment structurally alter how a mind processes information over time. Nurture can either completely optimize or heavily constrain our hereditary potential. Zooming out even further, we encounter cultural causes. This goes way beyond the immediate physical room you're sitting in and examines the broader societal norms and epistemological beliefs that a learner brings to the table. Think about it. How does a specific culture value intellectual authority? What are the traditional, historical ways knowledge is transferred within that community? These cultural frameworks provide the specific lens through which a learner interprets new data, and that deeply influences their intrinsic motivation and their overall cognitive engagement. And this brilliantly illustrates how these three causes, hereditary, environmental, and cultural, absolutely do not exist in a vacuum. They form this complex, dynamic mix that interacts constantly to shape every unique mind. Your genetic hardware, the environmental resources you operate within, and the societal lens you wear are continuously compounding on one another. It is the specific, inescapable friction between these three domains that dictates a learner's ultimate cognitive profile.
Section 3. Frameworks for learning.
Now, how do educators actually make sense of this complex mix? Well, as you're likely familiar with from Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, we long ago moved past this idea of intelligence as a single static metric like an IQ score. For those of us in this space, the framework is a really familiar reminder of our diverse cognitive capacities. But its ongoing real-world value lies in its application. It's about recognizing that a deficit in, say, logical mathematical processing doesn't negate high-level spatial, musical, or interpersonal processing. It forces educators to actually map their content to the specific type of intelligence being utilized by the learner.
Now, what's really interesting to visualize here is the highly popular VAC model, which categorizes learners into visual, auditory, and kinesthetic profiles. While this is a foundational concept we're all pretty familiar with, actively considering which slice of this framework your learners resonate with is the very first step to optimization. Whether someone is encoding visual data matrices, synthesizing auditory lectures, or requiring tactile, hands-on engagement, aligning your delivery mechanism with the learner's dominant modality removes so many unnecessary processing barriers. Let's move to Section 4 and see how this builds into real-world application, the modern inclusive classroom.
So, the crucial point is how we actually apply these frameworks. The direct implications for teaching really come down to two core interconnected concepts: differentiated instruction and inclusive classrooms. Think of differentiated instruction as the action. It's the tactical deployment of pedagogical methods, modifying your inputs and outputs to match those varied intelligence types and processing speeds we just talked about. An inclusive classroom, conversely, is the environment that is created by those actions. It's the systemic result where learners, regardless of their hereditary, environmental, or cultural background, are genuinely accommodated. The action of differentiation is the mechanical foundation that makes the environment of true inclusion possible.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to consider the inherent paradox of modern education. We operate within systems that heavily favor standardization, right? Standardized metrics, uniform curriculums, singular benchmarks of success. Yet, the cognitive reality, as we've seen today, is that every single mind is wonderfully, biologically, and culturally unique. So if every mind is distinct, how do we ensure no learner is left behind in a standardized world? It demands a massive shift away from forcing the learner to fit the system toward designing systems agile enough to embrace the learner. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope this prompts a much deeper analysis of the cognitive variances in the environments all around you.